Ethan Walker had lived his whole life in the quiet farming town of Ridgeford, a place where nothing unusual ever happened. The days were slow, the nights were peaceful, and most people believed the world would never change. But one calm evening, just after the sun disappeared behind the hills, something bright streaked across the sky like a falling star. It moved too fast, too low, and too close to be anything natural. Ethan stood outside his workshop, wiping oil from his hands after hours of repairing an old generator, and he watched the strange light sweep across the horizon. At first he thought it was some military jet testing a new engine, but then it dipped sharply and vanished behind the northern fields with a thundering sound that shook the ground beneath his boots. His heart jumped. Nothing ever fell in Ridgeford except rain and autumn leaves. This was different. The animals in nearby barns stirred, and a few dogs began barking wildly at the night sky. Ethan grabbed his flashlight, climbed into his truck, and drove toward the fields. The dirt road was rough, and dust rose behind the wheels as he pushed the truck faster than usual. Curiosity pulled him forward, but so did a strange feeling in his chest, like something important had just happened. When he reached the far end of the fields, he saw a soft glow rising from the tall grass. The light wasn't fire. It was too steady, too blue. Ethan parked the truck and stepped out carefully. The night air was cool, and the scent of earth mixed with the faint smell of something metallic. His flashlight swung across the field until it landed on a round shape half buried in the soil. It looked like a capsule, smooth and silver, with a faint shimmer on its surface. No windows, no markings, nothing he recognized from any machine on Earth. He walked closer, slowly, almost holding his breath. The capsule gave off a low hum like a sleeping engine. Then, without warning, a thin line of light appeared on its surface. The line widened, and a soft hiss escaped as the capsule opened. Ethan froze in place, his flashlight shaking in his hand. He expected smoke, fire, or perhaps a robotic arm. He was not prepared for what stepped out. A girl stood inside the capsule. She looked around cautiously, her eyes wide and bright with confusion. She seemed humans, same height as Ethan, same shape, same features. But there was something different about her. Her skin had a faint, soft glow, almost like moonlight. Her hair shimmered even in the darkness, and when she moved, it was with a strange lightness, as if the gravity here was too heavy for her, but she was trying to adjust. Ethan swallowed hard, unsure what to say or do. He had fixed engines, tractors, generators, radios, even motorcycles, but he had never dealt with anything like this. The girl turned her gaze to him, and for a moment, he felt like she was looking through him rather than at him. Then she stepped out of the capsule and touched the grass with bare feet, watching it bend under her weight like it was something magical. She said something, a soft melody of sounds that didn't match any language Ethan had ever heard. The words floated gently, almost musical, but impossible to understand. Ethan raised both hands slowly to show he meant no harm. "It's okay," he said softly. You're safe." The girl tilted her head, listening. She repeated one of the sounds from her own language, then tried to copy his last word. Her voice was warm and calming, but the word came out slightly strange. "Safe." Ethan nodded quickly, relieved she was trying to communicate. She touched her chest and said a short, clear word. "Lyra." Ah. He understood. Her name. He pointed to himself. "Ethan." She tried to repeat it, and though her accent was unusual, the name sounded right enough. Then her soft, glowing eyes drifted back to the capsule, and she made a small gesture that seemed sad. Ethan couldn't understand the gesture, but he could sense it. She wasn't just lost. She was alone and confused in a place she didn't know. He looked at the capsule again. It was cracked on one side. Something had gone wrong when it landed. He had no idea how to fix something that wasn't from Earth, but he knew leaving it here was dangerous. Someone else might come across it, someone who wouldn't respond kindly. "Come with me," he said gently. "I can help." Lyra blinked, her expression uncertain. She touched the side of the capsule once more, as if saying goodbye. Then she stepped toward him. Ethan led her to the truck, opening the passenger door and helping her inside. She looked around at the seats, buttons, and mirrors with wide curiosity. When he turned the engine on, she flinched at the vibration, then relaxed when she realized nothing was attacking her. Ethan drove slowly this time, careful not to scare her. She kept staring out the window, her eyes following the moving lights and shapes of trees, as if every single thing was new and beautiful. Back in town, he parked behind his workshop. This was the safest place, quiet, hidden, and familiar. He opened the door, and Lyra stepped out, looking around as if the old building was a palace. She touched the wooden walls, examined the rusty tools, and watched the small moths around the porch light like they were glowing stars. "Come inside," Ethan said, unlocking the workshop door. She followed him in. The workshop was warm and full of old machines, wires, and metal pieces. Instead of looking scared by the clutter, Lyra seemed fascinated. She picked up a wrench, held it close to her face, and gently tapped it against her palm as if learning its purpose through sound and touch. Ethan smiled a little. "Yeah, that's a wrench," she repeated the word softly. "Wrench." He took a deep breath and tried to think logically. She needed shelter, food, and safety. He didn't know how long she planned to stay or if she even could go back to wherever she came from. For now, he needed to make her comfortable. He pointed to an old chair. "Sit." She sat carefully, folding her hands in her lap, watching him with calm attention. He opened a small fridge and took out a bottle of water. Lyra seemed curious, but hesitant. When he opened it and took a sip, she understood. She accepted the bottle and took a small sip. Her eyes widened in delight, as if water was something rare or new. She drank slowly, appreciating each drop. Ethan tried not to stare. The way she reacted to the simplest things made him realize she came from a world where life was different. Maybe colder, maybe stricter, maybe less human. After some time, she looked at him and said softly, "Earth." She said it like she was testing the word, trying to understand its meaning. Ethan nodded. "Yes, Earth." She placed her hand on her chest again. "Lyra," then she pointed gently at her heart. "Stay." Her question was simple, but it carried weight. Did she want to stay here? Did she mean for the night? Or forever? Ethan wasn't sure, but he could see the fear in her eyes, mixed with hope. He nodded slowly. "You can stay. You're safe here." She relaxed, her shoulders easing as if a burden had lifted. She looked around the workshop again, then back at him with a soft, grateful expression. The humming light of the workshop reflected in her eyes, and for a moment Ethan felt a strange warmth in the room, feeling like destiny had brought her here. Outside, the night stayed quiet. The stars that had brought Lyra to Earth shone high above. But she sat calmly, her glowing presence filling the small workshop with a gentle peace. And in that moment, Ethan knew something clearly. His quiet life had just changed forever. The next morning in Richford began like every other day, but inside Ethan's workshop, everything felt strangely new. Sunlight slipped through the dusty windows, warming the wooden floor and touching the quiet figure sitting near Ethan's toolbox. Lyra had not slept much. At least Ethan didn't think she had. She sat cross-legged on the floor, watching the sun rise with wide, curious eyes, as if she had never seen a morning before. Ethan walked in holding 2 cups of warm tea. He was still, unsure what she liked, what she could eat or drink, or if her body reacted differently than humans. But she accepted the cup politely, warming her hands with it even though she didn't drink. Her attention stayed on the glowing light outside. "You like the sun, huh?" Ethan asked softly. Lyra blinked and looked at him. She pointed to the window and said slowly, "Warm, beautiful." Her words came out clear, gentle, and filled with a new understanding. She was learning fast, much faster than he expected. Ethan smiled. "Yeah, it's beautiful." She repeated beautiful and nodded to herself, memorizing the meaning. They sat quietly for a moment. Then Lyra reached out and touched the small radio on the table. When the speaker crackled with soft country music, her face lit up with amazement. The tune was simple, calming, with a gentle guitar. Lyra leaned closer, listening carefully, her head tilting in rhythm with the melody. It was as if the music wrapped around her like something warm and comforting. "You like music?" Ethan asked. She placed her hand on her heart and nodded. "Feel, inside." Her simple words carried deep meaning, and Ethan suddenly understood. Where she came from, maybe music didn't exist. Maybe life was quiet, organized, controlled, without emotion. She looked at the small speaker as if it held a secret she never knew she needed. After breakfast, Ethan stepped outside to check the fields. Lyra followed him, but she walked slowly. Looking at every detail, the soil, the sky, the birds crossing above. When a breeze touched her face, she paused and closed her eyes with a peaceful smile. It was as if she felt things more deeply than humans, as if every new experience touched her heart. Ethan watched her with growing curiosity. He wondered what kind of world she'd come from, where simple things like wind and sunlight seemed new to her. As they reached the barn, Ethan noticed a problem. The old tractor he needed for the day's work wasn't starting again. He sighed and lifted the hood, hoping for a miracle. Lyra stood beside him, watching quietly. After a moment, she stepped closer and pointed at the engine. "May I?" she asked softly. Ethan blinked. "You want to help?" She nodded. Unsure, but trusting her, he stepped to the side. Lyra leaned in, examining the engine with surprising focus. Her eyes moved across the wires and metal parts like she was reading them. Then she reached out and gently pressed her hand against a small panel. She closed her eyes for a moment. A soft glow passed through her fingertips, barely noticeable, but enough for Ethan to catch. When she removed her hand, she pointed to a loose connection. "This wrong," she said. Ethan checked the spot. The wire she pointed at was indeed loose, something he had overlooked. He tightened it, then turned the key. The tractor roared to life instantly. He stared at Lyra with open amazement. "How did you know that?" She touched her head lightly. "Learn. Machines speak. I listen," Ethan exhaled. She wasn't just curious, she was brilliant, and her abilities weren't magic. They were knowledge and sensitivity far beyond human levels. She could understand machines like another person might understand emotions. "You're incredible," he said softly. She smiled, a warm, small smile he had not seen before. "Thank you," the day continued, with small tasks around the workshop. Lyra tried to help wherever she could. Sometimes she made mistakes like trying to use a hammer backward, or accidentally turning on all the workshop lights at once. But her curiosity made everything amusing rather than troublesome. Ethan guided, her patiently explaining each tool, each object, each word, and Lyra repeated everything with interest, storing the knowledge carefully. At noon, Ethan took her to the edge of town. He didn't want to bring her around too many people yet, but he thought she should see more of Earth. They walked along. A small path near the creek where water sparkled under the sun. Lyra crouched beside the stream, touching the water with her fingertips. She laughed softly at the cold sensation, as if it was a surprise. "Cold," she said, smiling. "Yeah," Ethan replied, "fresh from the mountains." She watched the flow for a long time, completely absorbed. Then she looked at Ethan and asked, "Your people live with nature?" He shrugged. "We try, some more than others." She looked thoughtful, her eyes following the creek again. "My people. Not like this." Ethan sat on a nearby rock. "What's it like where you're from?" Lyra hesitated. She looked down, her expression dimming a little. Then she spoke slowly, choosing her words with care. "My world. Big ships, bright lights, no wind, no sky. Everything. Controlled." She touched her chest lightly. "We live with rules, emotions, not needed." Ethan frowned gently. "No emotions?" Lyra shook her head. "Not allowed to show, not safe." She didn't sound angry or afraid, just sad like someone remembering a place that looked perfect from the outside, but felt empty inside. "So why did you leave?" Ethan asked softly. She took a deep breath. "I wanted more. To feel, to understand life. I escaped during travel. My capsule broke, and I fell here." Ethan's heart tightened. She had taken a risk bigger than anything he could imagine, leaving a controlled world to search for something as simple as emotion. It made him look at her differently. She wasn't just lost, she was brave. You found Earth, he said. And Earth is a good place to feel things. Lyra smiled faintly. Yes, on their way back they passed by a couple of townsfolk. Mrs. Harper, an elderly woman known for her friendly nature, waved at Ethan. Who's your new friend? She asked, smiling warmly at Lyra. Ethan kept calm. She's visiting. New in town. Mrs. Harper nodded approvingly. Well, welcome, dear. If you ever need fresh bread, come by my bakery. Lyra didn't understand every word, but she recognized kindness. She bowed slightly in respect, causing Mrs. Harper to chuckle. What a polite young lady, she said before walking away. Lyra watched her leave, then whispered, humans. Kind. Most of them, Ethan replied with a smile. Back at the workshop, the day slowly turned into evening. Lyra sat near the window again, watching the shadows grow long as the sun began to dip. Ethan cooked a simple meal and handed her a plate. She tasted everything carefully, fascinated by each flavor. When she liked something, her eyes brightened. When she didn't, she scrunched her nose gently, making Ethan laugh. After dinner, they cleaned the workshop together. Lyra hummed softly a tune she had heard from the radio earlier. The simple melody floated through the room, warm and peaceful. You're learning a lot, Ethan said, sweeping the floor. Lyra looked at him proudly. Earth teaches much. People teach much. You teach much. Her words touched him more than he expected. As night settled outside, Lyra wandered to the open door and looked up at the sky. The stars glimmered brightly above, thousands of them scattered like silver dust. She reached out her hand as if trying to touch them. There, she whispered, my home. Ethan stood behind her. Do you miss it? She was quiet for a long time. Then she shook her head gently. My heart. She touched her chest again. It feels warm here. Ethan didn't reply. He didn't need to. Her presence had already brought something new into his life, something he didn't fully understand yet. The night breeze moved softly through the quiet workshop yard. Lyra lowered her hand from the sky and turned toward Ethan with a calm, hopeful expression. She wasn't just learning Earth, she was becoming part of it. And it was clear to Ethan that she wasn't the only one changing. Something inside him was changing too. The peaceful days in Ridgeford continued, but something began to change around the edges of the quiet town. It started with unusual sounds in the night sky, soft humming noises that were too steady to be wind and too smooth to be planes. Then, strange glimmers appeared above the hills, fading before anyone could point them out clearly. Most townsfolk ignored them, too busy with their daily lives to think much of the sky. But Ethan noticed. And so did Lyra. One evening, just as Ethan locked the workshop after a long day of repairing machines, Lyra stood outside staring at the sky. Her eyes were fixed on the faint shimmer moving slowly above the clouds. It was subtle, but Ethan could tell she recognized it. You see something? He said quietly. Lyra nodded slowly. Yes, they look for me. Ethan felt the air grow heavier. He stepped beside her. Them? Meaning your people? She sighed softly, the sound filled with sadness. Yes, my starship searches. They send scouts. Small lights. She pointed at the fading glow in the sky. They want me back. Ethan stayed quiet for a moment. Are they dangerous? No, Lyra answered. Not dangerous, but strict. They do not harm, they control. Her words were soft but clear. If they find me, they will take me home. They will say Earth is not for me. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. He didn't want her to leave, not because she needed him, but because she had changed everything around him. Her presence had brought warmth, curiosity, and a sense of wonder that he didn't realize he was missing. You don't want to go back, he said gently. Lyra wrapped her arms around herself as if the night air suddenly felt colder. I do not want the life I had. No choices. No feelings, no freedom to decide my path. She looked at him with honest eyes. Here, I feel alive. Ethan placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Then we'll figure this out. Over the next few days, strange signs continued. The animals became restless at night. The lights in the sky appeared more often. In one morning, a faint buzzing noise echoed from the fields, the kind of sound Ethan had never heard on Earth. Lyra knew immediately what it meant. Scouts, she whispered. They come closer. Still, she tried to continue her days as calmly as possible. She helped Ethan with machines, learned new words, and spent afternoons exploring the town's simple wonders. The townspeople liked her gentle nature and thoughtful manners. Some thought she was a quiet traveler from far away. Others assumed she was just shy. No one suspected the truth. One afternoon, Ethan took her to the small town market. It was a bright, welcoming place filled with fresh vegetables, handmade crafts, and cheerful voices. Lyra walked slowly, studying everything like she was seeing a new world for the first time. A little girl selling flowers offered Lyra a small white blossom. Lyra's face brightened as she smelled it, amazed by the soft scent. She placed it carefully behind her ear and bowed in thanks. The child giggled, delighted. Moments like that made Ethan smile, but they also made him worry. Lyra wasn't hiding well. She shined in every place she went. Not because she tried to, but because she couldn't help it. As they returned home, Lyra suddenly stopped and turned her face to the sky. Her breathing changed. "What is it?" Ethan asked. She spoke quietly. "They search closer tonight. They feel my signal. I cannot hide forever." Ethan frowned. "Signal?" Lyra touched the faint glowing line on her wrist, something Ethan had noticed before but never questioned deeply. "This part of my people's technology helps them locate us anywhere." She looked upset. "I blocked it when I arrived." "But the block weakens." Ethan studied the glowing mark. "Can you turn it off?" She shook her head. "Not forever. They built us with connections. Always watching. Always guiding." It hurt Ethan to see her look so trapped. That night the sky glowed again, this time. Stronger, closer, more focused. A soft beam of light swept across the fields like a quiet searchlight. Lyra stood by the window, hands trembling slightly, watching it pass. "They know I'm here," she whispered. "Soon they will come." Ethan stepped beside her. "You don't have to go." "You said you want to stay." Lyra looked down, her voice barely a whisper. "But they do not understand wanting. They only understand duty." The next day brought tension neither of them could ignore. Lyra struggled to focus on simple tasks. Even the sound of birds startled her. Ethan tried to keep her calm, giving her small jobs in the workshop, talking to her gently, and playing soft music on the radio. Music always comforted her. At noon, they sat under the shade of an old tree behind the workshop. The breeze blew softly, and the fields stretched quiet and wide. Lyra looked at the grass moving gently, her fingers brushing the blades. "Earth feels warm," she said softly. "My planet feels cold, not in temperature, but in spirit." Ethan listened carefully. "My people believe emotion makes life weak," she continued. "They removed it over time. They speak of peace and logic, but it is empty." Her voice trembled slightly. "When I first heard music here, I felt something new, a place inside me, waking." Ethan felt something deep inside at her words. "You deserve a life where you can feel," he said. She turned to him, her eyes bright but sad. "But they will not understand. They will take me back, and then this feeling will fade." "Ah!" Ethan shook his head. "Not if we fight for your choice." Lyra looked uncertain. "Humans fight with strength. My people fight with rules. Rules are harder to break." He offered her a small apple from the basket beside them. She smiled and accepted it, taking a gentle bite. The simple taste seemed to calm her. She leaned her head slightly against the tree and closed her eyes, letting the soft sounds of earth soothe her troubled heart. But peace did not last long. That night, everything changed. Ethan woke to a sound unlike anything he had heard before, low, steady humming that grew louder every second. He rushed outside, still half-dressed, and saw a glowing object descending slowly near the edge of the field. It wasn't a ship, not like anything from movies. It was a smooth floating drone, round, silent, and shining with soft blue light. Lyra was already outside, frozen in place, as she watched it land. The drone hovered a few feet above the ground, then projected a gentle light toward Lyra. A calm voice echoed from it, not human, not cold, but emotionless. "Lyra of the starship Vesian. You are requested to return. Your absence has been registered. Your location is known." Ethan stepped forward instinctively. placing himself slightly between Lyra and the drone. "What do you want?" he asked firmly. The drone ignored him completely. Its light remained focused on Lyra. "Mission retrieval active. Please prepare for transport." Lyra took a small step backward, fear rising in her eyes. "I cannot return," she whispered. The drone replied instantly. "Your choices are noted. Return is required. Await instructions." Ethan clenched his fists. "She's not going anywhere." The drone's voice stayed calm. Human interference irrelevant. Authorization higher. Lyra shook her head, her voice trembling. "I choose Earth. I choose my own path." There was a long pause. The drone's light flickered as if processing her words. Then it spoke again. Choice registered. Message will be transmitted to ship. Await decision." With that, the drone lifted gently into the sky and vanished among the stars. Lyra sank to her knees, shaking. Ethan rushed to her side. "It's okay," he whispered. "Didn't take you." Lyra nodded weakly. "But the ship will decide now. They will send more. Or accept." Ethan held her steady. "Whatever they choose, we face it together." The night around them grew quiet again, but neither of them felt calm. Something big had begun. Something that would decide Lyra's future and, maybe even her freedom. The stars above them sparkled softly, as if waiting for her answer. But in her heart, Lyra already knew her choice. She wanted Earth. She wanted a life where she could feel. And she hoped the stars would finally let her go. The night after the drone arrived felt heavier than any night Lyra had ever experienced. Ethan barely slept, and Lyra didn't sleep at all. She sat near the workshop window, watching the sky the way someone might watch a door waiting for something she feared but knew would come. The stars above were gentle and quiet, but they no longer comforted her. They reminded her of a home she ran from, a life she didn't want, and a future she hoped to escape. Ethan walked into the workshop at dawn, rubbing his tired eyes. Found Lyra sitting in the same place, her hands wrapped around her knees, her face calm but sad. "You didn't rest," he said softly. Lyra shook her head. "I cannot rest until they decide." Ethan pulled up a chair and sat beside her. "Then we face today together, no matter what happens." His words warmed her heart a little. She looked at him, noticing how tired he was and how hard he was trying to stay strong. She appreciated him more than she could explain in words. Outside, the sun slowly rose, coloring the fields in shades of gold. Lyra watched the sunrise carefully, as if trying to memorize every detail. "This world, it feels alive," she whispered. "My world feels like a machine." Ethan nodded. "You belong where your heart feels right." Those simple words gave her courage. The morning passed quietly. Ethan tried to keep their day normal. He fixed a small engine while Lyra handed him tools, listening carefully to everything he explained. She still learned with surprising speed, and sometimes she gently corrected him when she sensed a small issue in a machine before he did. It made him laugh and softened the tension around them. But even with the normal tasks, both of them kept glancing at the sky. In the afternoon, the town began to notice something strange. Animals were restless, birds flew away in large groups, and the wind seemed to move in short, sudden bursts. Lyra felt it too. She stopped walking and closed her eyes, sensing vibrations in the air that Ethan couldn't feel. They prepare," she said quietly. "My people received my message. Now they send their answer." Ethan felt a nervous twist inside. What kind of answer? Lyra opened her eyes slowly. Decision. They will send something or someone. It will either allow me to stay or they will command me to return. Command, Ethan echoed. But they can't force you. You have the right to choose. In your world, yes, Lyra said softly. But in mine, choices belong to the group, not the individual. Ethan shook his head, clearly frustrated. That's not living. Lyra smiled sadly.
I know.
That is why I left. As evening approached, the sky grew unusually still. Even the breeze paused as if waiting. Lyra and Ethan stood behind the workshop, facing the open fields where the drone had appeared before. Lyra felt something deep. In her chest a soft pull, like a distant signal calling her name. She placed a hand over her heart. They are close. Ethan stood beside her. I didn't touch her, but his presence was enough to give her strength. Just remember, you're not alone here. The first sign was a small point of light high above, brighter than any star. It grew slowly larger, descending in a calm, graceful line. Soon, a shape appeared, a sleek, silver object nearly silent in the air. It wasn't big like a starship, but bigger than the drone. More like a transport pod. It hovered above the field, lowering gently until it floated a few feet above the ground. Ethan tensed, but Lyra stepped forward, her face calm, though her hand shook slightly. This is the messenger pod, she said. Carries orders and responses. A soft light projected from the pod, forming a clear, smooth shape, most like a figure made of pure light. The figure didn't have a face, but its presence felt powerful and official. A gentle, emotionless voice filled the air. Lyra, daughter of Vessian command, we received your message. Lyra nodded respectfully. Thank you. You state you wish to remain on Earth? The voice continued. You state you have learned new emotions and experiences. This is unexpected. Lyra took a slow breath. Yes, I choose Earth. I choose freedom. The figure flickered slightly, as if processing her words. Emotion causes instability. Freedom causes disorder. These principles are not aligned with our system. I understand, Lyra replied softly. But I am not part of your system anymore. I request to stay where I feel alive. The figure paused again. Ethan felt his heart pounding. He stepped beside her. She belongs here. With people who care. With a life she chose. This time, the figure responded to him directly. Human involvement is noted. Your emotional influence is strong. Ethan didn't back down. Her decision is hers, not mine, not yours. Lyra glanced at Ethan with gratitude. The glowing figure hummed softly. Lyra, you left your post. You abandoned your ship. This action is uncommon. Lyra raised her chin. Because our world does not allow choice. I could not continue living without choosing for myself. The figure paused longer than before. Then the voice answered, surprisingly calm. Your request will be evaluated. The pod dimmed and fell silent. Ethan frowned. That's it? They're not taking you? No, Lyra said calmly. They analyze long before making decisions. The pod floated higher and disappeared into the sky. Lyra's legs trembled. She sank to the ground, overwhelmed. Ethan sat beside her. What happens now? He asked gently. They will send their final decision soon, she whispered. Tonight or tomorrow? Ethan sighed and leaned against the tree behind them. I hate waiting. Lyra laughed softly, even in her stress. I am not good at waiting either. They sat quietly. The sky darkened into deep blue. Crickets began to sing. Fireflies appeared around them, glowing softly. Lyra watched the tiny lights with awe. Earth has living stars on the ground, she whispered, catching one on her fingertip before letting it fly away. My world has only lights made by machines. Ethan looked at her glowing expression and felt something shift in his heart. He didn't say anything he didn't need to, but he knew he didn't want to lose her. Later, inside the workshop, Lyra walked slowly around the room, touching objects she had grown familiar with, a wrench, a small radio, an old engine part. She looked at each one like a memory she feared she might lose. Do you think they will let me stay? She asked softly. Ethan answered honestly, I don't know. But I do know what you deserve. She turned to him. What? A life you choose, he said. Not a life someone forces on you. She smiled a little, placing her hand gently on her chest. My heart feels strong here. Then we'll stand by it, Ethan replied. They sat together until late night. The workshop was warm and quiet. Lyra hummed the tune she had learned from the radio, the same soft melody she loved. The sound filled the room with peace. But outside, the stars gathered their answer. Somewhere far above, Lyra's future was being decided. Still, in her heart, she already knew what she wanted. She wanted Earth. She wanted a life with emotion. She wanted to stay where her heart finally felt at home. The morning of the final day rose quietly over Ridgeford. But inside Ethan's workshop, everything felt tense, like the world was holding its breath. Lyra stood near the doorway, watching the sky with eyes full of worry and hope. She had never waited for anything so important before. On her planet, decisions were made instantly and without emotion. But here, she felt every second, every heartbeat, every possibility. Ethan walked in with 2 cups of warm tea. His face looked tired, but his eyes held calm determination. "You okay?" he asked softly. Lyra nodded, though she didn't feel steady. "I try to be." He handed her the tea. "Whatever happens today, I'm here." Those words grounded her. She held the cup between her hands, letting the warmth sink into her fingers. "Thank you, Ethan," she whispered. "You helped me learn more than I ever knew possible." He smiled gently. "You helped me too." But neither could pretend the day was normal. They stepped outside to work as usual, but both kept glancing at the sky. The air felt strange still, quiet, filled with silent expectation. Around noon, Lyra suddenly stopped in the middle of handing Ethan a tool. She looked upward, her breath catching. "What is it?" Ethan asked quickly. "They come," she whispered. "The final message." He stepped beside her, following her gaze. Far above, a point of shimmering silver cut through the sky, descending slowly and gracefully. It wasn't threatening. It wasn't loud. But it carried weight, the kind of presence that said everything was about to change. The pod from the previous night returned, gliding down until it hovered gently above the field behind the workshop. Ethan and Lyra walked toward it slowly. Lyra's hands trembled slightly, but her face stayed calm, ready to accept whatever answer waited for her. The pod projected its light again, forming the same faceless figure, smooth, bright, gentle in shape, but firm in energy. The voice that followed was calm, controlled, clear. "Lyra of Vessian, your request has been fully evaluated." Lyra's heart pounded. Ethan stood close enough to support her if she collapsed. The voice continued. "You state you choose Earth. You state you choose freedom. You state you choose emotion." Lyra nodded once, steady. "Yes, I choose." There was a long pause. The air felt so still that even the grass seemed to hold stillness. Finally, the voice spoke again, soft, but carrying something new, something almost like respect. "Your decision is accepted," Lyra gasped softly, her eyes widening. Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "You are released from Vessian duties," the voice continued. "You are recognized as an independent being. Your choice of planet is approved. Your emotional development is permitted." Lyra covered her mouth, her voice trembling. I can stay." "Yes," the figure answered. "You are free." Lyra's knees weakened, and Ethan instinctively caught her, steadying her gently. Her glowing eyes filled with relief, real, deep relief. She had fought for her freedom, fought for her right to choose, and now she had it. The figure's voice spoke again, softer now. "You are the first of our kind to seek emotion. Your journey will be observed from afar, but no interference will follow."
Ow.
Lyra straightened, wiping her eyes gently. "Thank you." For understanding, there was a faint hum, almost like an approving sound. "You show courage," the voice said. "Your path is yours now." The pod floated a little higher, preparing to leave. Before it rose completely, the voice added one last message. "Live well, Lyra." The pod glowed bright, then ascended into the sky, becoming a small point of silver, before fading entirely. The field fell silent again. Only the soft rustle of grass and distant bird calls remained. Lyra stood still, staring at the sky, unable to move. Ethan touched her shoulder gently. "Lyra, you did it." She turned to him, her eyes bright with a mix of joy and disbelief. "I am free. I can stay. I can live here. Truly live." Ethan smiled at her, full of warmth. "Welcome home." The word home hit her with overwhelming emotion. She stepped forward and wrapped him in a gentle, grateful embrace. Ethan held her carefully, the moment filled with peace and quiet triumph. No fear, no uncertainty. no rules forcing her path. When they returned to the workshop, everything seemed different, not because the building had changed, but because Lyra's future finally felt real. She walked around touching objects, stools, wires, engines, as if every ordinary thing was now a treasure, a life she could choose, a world she could grow in. Ethan cooked a simple meal for them. Lyra helped, watching closely and laughing gently when she accidentally dropped a spoon. The sound of her laughter filled the room with a happiness Ethan hadn't heard in years. After eating, they stepped outside to breathe the evening air. The sky was painted with soft colors: pinks, oranges, golds. Lyra stood in the field, her hair glowing faintly in the sunset, her face calm and full of wonder. "Earth is beautiful," she whispered. "Yeah," Ethan replied, "but it's more beautiful now." Lyra looked down at her hands. "I feel things I never felt before. Warmth, hope, peace." She placed her hand lightly over her heart. This beat stronger here. Ethan watched her, moved by how deeply she experienced the world. She wasn't just an alien visitor anymore. She was someone discovering life for the first time. As the sun finally dipped behind the fields, Lyra spoke again, her voice soft but steady. "What happens next?" she asked. Ethan shrugged with a gentle smile. "Whatever you want. That's the best part." She thought about it. "I want to learn more, help more, understand your world, build something new." "We can do that," Ethan said. "And stay here," she added, her eyes warm. "Near you." Ethan felt his heart warm. "You can stay as long as you want." Lyra breathed deeply, feeling the cool evening air fill her lungs. "Then I choose here. This workshop, this town, this life." As night settled in, they walked back inside together. The workshop lights shone softly, casting warm shadows across the room. Lyra touched the small radio and turned on the gentle music she loved. The melody filled the space with calm, hopeful notes. She sat by the window again, watching the stars, but not with fear this time, with peace. Those stars had once been her home. Now they were simply lights in the sky, far away from the world she chose, the world that gave her a heart that truly felt. Ethan sat beside her, and together they listened to the quiet music. Knowing everything ahead of them was new, open, and full of possibility. Lyra had come from the stars. But now, her heart belonged on Earth forever.